Yeah, I mean, I get it on the one hand. I feel like we're almost going back and forth between like pitting the incels and the femcells together and laughing at the ridiculousness of the alpha male theory. And yet I know how easy it is to get sucked into so many of these things. I mean, we heard it from our last caller. And I guess I'm curious when you are learning anything about dating online or just trying to learn how to be a happier, healthier person. Of course, we want to apply those like normal critical thinking and skepticism skills. But Emma, do you have any advice for how to like be aware of this kind of manosphere thinking in particular? What some of those red flags are?
Well, it's like anything that veers towards the really conspiratorial or almost cult-esque, there tends to be like a secret language. If you look at something and you half the words you don't understand because you don't recognize, that's a pretty big red. You shouldn't have to learn a secret code to
Mm-hmm.
understand basic life advice. So that's kind of a main thing I would say. The other thing, and this I kind of apply. This may be overly skeptical, but this is something I apply in life sort of generally is work out if they're trying to sell you something. Because if, again, where this all originates with pickup artistry, it's about selling a course, it's about selling a book, and then they've got 5 more books, and if it was successful the first time, you wouldn't need to buy the next book.
Sure.
And suddenly it's, whether it's on YouTube and, it's I don't know, sponsorships or I mean, there's perfectly reasonable books out there, but generally, if it's like the only way to be like me and be manly and cool and get a wife is to send me 29.99, that's like a major red
This
flag.
one quick secret that I will tell you over the course of 10 hours.
Yeah, if it's so simple and will change your life, but also so complex that you can't learn it anywhere else, it's not real. It's impossible.
And it's like probably pseudoscience again. If you're having to pay this guy, 6 easy installments of 1999, I bet that's not peer-reviewed scientific research. I'm just throwing that out there,
Fair to
publish
say.
that someplace
Yeah.
legitimate and make it available if that's real information. But, of course, it's not.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
we've kind of highlighted some of the like specific language and jargon, and I think that's an important red flag. I'm gonna really stick to that idea of like objective beauty and like this is what makes somebody attractive and people being in or out of each other's leagues. I think that's an important one to highlight. But even if we are far away from like traditional manosphere spaces, we're just having a conversation in the park with a friend. What are like some of the thinking patterns or some of the beliefs that we want to be, I don't know, maybe skeptical about or kind of wary and pushing back on?
There's so much that is just, like you say, kind of just deeply ingrained, sort of socially and culturally, whether it's things like, when you look at media and how normal a relationship between, say, an older man and a younger woman is, and how abnormal a relationship between an older woman and a younger man is,
Hmm.
or, even stuff like we see fewer queer relationships and things like that. And then you tend to there's kind of a almost a comedy film trope that I always love, which is the like goofy, average looking dude and the supermodel woman.
The yeah,
Um
doofy dad and hot wife. Yeah.
and hot like yeah, exactly. There's a lot of kind of tropes like that. And we do also I think it's natural for a lot of us to kind of put ourselves down and assume that we are all sort of that there is some kind of scale and we're all low down on it. I mean, if that was true, then there wouldn't the scale would be smaller, you know? But yeah, I think some of that is just and human self-deprecation to just think that it's so common as well when you get into relationships, you sort of start to see a pattern of always thinking that the other person is kind of like too good for you, but that's like love is two people thinking they're too good for each other. And yeah, it's difficult. You there's a lot of you will see the same kind of examples of when it comes to what about X not traditionally attractive male with super hot girlfriend, and the kind of red pill manosphere will find a lot of ways to excuse things like that, and it tends to be money or fame or whatever. But that there's always real life average person examples of, non it's not tens dating tens, or, like women on whatever side always go for the 10 men, or whatever it's supposed to be. You can, as soon as you start spending time in real life and looking at real couples, you can see that that just isn't reality. So it's it's hard because you don't want to say like, well, look over there, there's an ugly dude and a hot woman, because that's not what we should behave like. But there is a way to have that conversation with your friends and sort of point out that real life doesn't really ascribe to those kind of made up values.
We're not using matching algorithms. We're having conversations.
Yeah, yeah. It's because you don't meet people via, well, maybe you do on dating apps, but most of the time you don't meet people via an algorithm. People just connect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And yeah, and that, you make such a good point too that, these are things that are, sort of like based on, I guess, sort of the qualia of experiences, and the things that you like about someone may have nothing to do with, whatever, if their weight or their height or the shape of their face conforms to certain standards. But it's so easy to fall into this trap of, oh well, we've quantified it, so now it's
Mm-hmm.
science, it's pseudoscience again, when we're randomly assigning numbers to things that are not quantitative in nature. Like, this is, and when I say in nature, I don't mean like out in the world, I mean they are not inherently quantitative things, that you can just get, oh well, that person is a 7.2. Based on what? What are you talking about? That's absurd.
I
Yeah.
mean,
And the thing is,
anything that implies that attractiveness or really any aspect of our humanity can be quantified and then particularly ranked. That's where
mm,
you're getting into trouble, because there's nothing universal about our humanity or what we choose to value in our humanity. I mean,
well,
I
that's it.
even like,
And
yeah, go ahead.
well, it's just that also we all have, within certain cultures specifically, but we're all exposed to the same beauty standards as well. So maybe 9 out of 10 women in this study think that Brad Pitt is number 10 on the attractiveness scale, but that's because we've seen Brad Pitt in so many movies and we've been told so many times that that is what is attractive. And
Mm,
that changes. I mean, you see this discussion a lot in like fine art, because the ideal model of what a beautiful woman is, say, is clearly demonstrated to change over time, and that's the same across the board.
Yeah, it's going to vary across time, across different places, like you said, different things that you're exposed to growing up and in the popular culture. I mean, these are not things that you can objectively rank. I'm sorry, you just can't do it. If
fair to
you
say.
think you can, you're not out talking to real people and having real meaningful interactions, in my opinion. So, okay, switching gears a little bit, but you mentioned this earlier, and I know I've heard you do a really good job of explaining this on your own channel, Emma, but the word female, what is going on with that, and why is it problematic in these circles?
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing, and I tend to get this kind of reactionary sort of opinion from people that think that I have a problem with just the term female in general. I think there are times when it can be appropriate, and if you say it occasionally, I don't think that's a problem. Um, it, the problem is that typically within this kind of manosphere, women tend to be described as either females, most commonly, or girls. And girls is its own problematic thing, because typically, this is another huge problem with these kind of forums and ideologies, is that they tend to rank attractiveness of women as a lot higher the younger they are, to the point of quite dangerous thinking again. Conversely, female is it tends to be used in more of a kind of an objectifying sort of way, and you can tell when it's being used that way because people will say men and females. They won't say males and
Mm,
females, they'll say men and females. or men and girls. And
Mm,
that's how
mhm.
you know that it would be like saying women and boys. It sounds weird. It sounds wrong because they're not equivalent words. And it's about it tends to then be in context of talking about women as things that operate like a computer program that operates under a set of rules that you can learn,
The female
and
algorithm can be
the
hacked.
female algorithm can then be hacked. Exactly. And that's when its usage is kind of problematic.
It's again trying to add that layer of science, which is actually pseudoscience, by using this term that sounds like I've picked up a biological term that I'm using here. Therefore, I must be speaking about something factual. Not to mention too that
Yeah.
it sounds like, what you're describing too is kind of an attempt to reduce women um, to their reproductive biology, almost in a
Mhm.
sense. We're taking away the cultural and the social elements of what we mean when we talk about gender, when we use words like men or women, and instead we're going to only give women the quote unquote biological term so that we can almost, it seems like almost trying to take away their humanity a little bit. Is that maybe taking
Yeah,
it too
I mean,
far?
I'll be honest, when I hear the phrase, "men and female," it doesn't sound great to me, but it doesn't ring an alarm or feel, I guess, awkward in the same way as, women and boys, just because of the way that we've been socialized, how we have, like, normalized a lot of that language. Hearing that explained to me, like, kinda set off a light bulb.
Hmm. Yeah, and the fact that that isn't alarming, I think says a
Yeah.
lot about, like you said, how normal this kind of thinking has become for us. Even those of us
Mhm.
who are not in this, manosphere or way of thinking, we have encountered this way of thinking and we've absorbed it to some extent, to the point that that didn't sound as abnormal, as the opposite. Yeah, that's a really good
Mhm.
point. So, are there other terms like that that you can think of, Emma, that are kind of just as soon as you hear it, oh, this is probably a red pill situation we're dealing with?
Ooh, it's hard because it's so kind of vast, but anything that is like it really is. You could do a whole actually I think on one of the Reddit forums about incels there was a whole glossary that somebody made because it's that in-depth sort of language. But as soon as you hear one of the most popular ones and sort of common ones is adding the word maxing onto the end of something, and
Mm.
that is to improve something to the best of your ability. So if you looks max, you're making your appearance as good as possible. If you gym
Optimizing.
max, you're going to the gym as much as possible. So if you hear anything described as something maxing, that's
Mm,
red pill language.
good to know.